We start with what could be an incredible transfer involving Jadon Sancho and Raheem Sterling. Both Chelsea and Manchester United are in talks over two separate deals for the players. All deals are being discussed, so that means a loan with an obligation and a permanent deal, all on the table right now. Chelsea's proposal to United was always going to involve a player moving in the other direction. It's thought Ben Chilwell and Sterling were the players being offered. Any deal for Sterling would have to make financial sense for United, given the wages that are involved. So once again, we are heading towards a deadline day and talking about Jadon Sancho. If this happens, and when I say if this happens, it's Sancho to Chelsea, Sterling to Manchester United. Does it solve a problem that both sides have got right now?
Can I shock you, Dave? I like this for all parties, so both players, both clubs. I think this makes complete sense. I think you've got two players at their respective clubs that aren't in matchday squads at the moment. They're not going to get picked, and probably not going to get picked in the near future. Sancho to Chelsea, I think he's a good fit within the makeup of their squad in terms of the age profile of the players that Chelsea have been getting in over the past few windows. Obviously gets him back to London as well. I think Sancho, at this point, you were kind of touching on it the other day, this next move is massive for him. He needs to go somewhere and settle. I feel like Chelsea would be a better environment for him than Manchester United at the moment, given everything that's happened at Manchester United for Jadon Sancho. For Sterling, it's clear that he's surplus to requirements. If you look at Manchester United's window, what they've actually done is they've been signing a lot of players, not younger players with high-level experience, players that have played at the highest level, and Raheem Sterling fits into that. As well, it wouldn't be clear where he'd naturally fit into their 11. At the moment, you still feel like they're quite heavy on the left-hand side, not so heavy on the right. But saying that, Sterling played a lot of his best football at Manchester City from that right-hand side. So I just think, given where both clubs are at the moment and given where both players are at the moment, I do think that everyone will be better off for this, if that makes sense.
I think also with regards to Raheem Sterling, apparently he's nicknamed at Chelsea as Uncle Raheem. And I think United probably could do with a bit of an uncle in the forward areas. I'm not saying he's an uncle, but that little bit of experience. Me and Dan were just speaking off air about Garnacho having to play off the right. Rashford still sort of being talked about as a youngster, and then two young strikers as well. You bring in someone like Sterling, who knows where the goal is, has scored for England, scored for Chelsea as well, to be fair, and Man City. Feels like a transfer that will really benefit him and also the rest of that front line.
Former striker Troy Deeney said on this channel last night that Sterling is better than everything United have right now. Do we agree with that? Troy Deeney saying that Sterling is better than everything United have got?
I think what Nubaid said there is really accurate, especially when you look at the options Manchester United have at the moment. On the right, they have Ahmad and Anthony, and then on the left, as you mentioned, Marcus Rashford and Garnacho. I think the obvious comparison perhaps Troy Deeney would be looking at is Marcus Rashford. He started the last two Premier League games, and I think when you compare his statistics to when Raheem Sterling joined Chelsea in 2022, you know, they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. You look at the goals, of course, Marcus Rashford has a few more, assists are similar. But I think, you know, what this graphic doesn't really show us is Marcus Rashford has been really out of form in the last year, you know, and I say that in, you know, not in a disrespectful way, but we saw his purple patch after the World Cup in Qatar, and he's really struggled to rediscover that form. So I think, you know, actually, on the balance of it, you'd probably want Alejandro Garnacho as a young player to be coming into United starting on the left. But in the first two Premier League games, he's persisted with Rashford. So there's adding Sterling, who would predominantly want to play on the left, you would imagine, add to that, or would that create a bit of a what do you do with five wingers? I think we'd have to find out, really.
Yeah, it was interesting, those stats, I think, from the comparison anyway between Rashford and Sterling since Sterling joined Chelsea. I think, you know, Dan touched on it a little bit there as well a moment ago, talking about environment for Sancho. You know, it feels like it's over for Sancho at United right now. What type of environment do we think that Sancho needs to thrive?
I think it's really difficult to tell, to be honest, because he goes to Borussia Dortmund, a club where he really thrived, where he sort of made his name, and I thought that environment was perfect for him. So in my mind, I actually thought that would be his eventual destination. Obviously, then Ten Hag mentioned that they've patched up. I don't know how true that was, looking at the evidence now. But then he goes to Chelsea, and where I agree with Dan to an extent in terms of like player profile could make a lot of sense. There's a lot of players at Chelsea that play right and left, meaning he's leaving United where he's competing with Rashford and Garnacho, and now he's going to Chelsea where he's competing against potentially Palmer, Noni Madueke, Pedro Neto. They've got a lot of wide forwards and generally just a lot of forwards. But I think in terms of environment, if Enzo Maresca wants a player, he tends to treat them quite well. Players tend to speak very highly of him, so that might work in his favour. I do think in this deal, he's probably the one that's kind of going, I probably didn't mind just going back to Dortmund again.
I think Sancho maybe has suffered at Manchester United by them. I think over the last few years, or ever since he's been there, you wouldn't say Manchester United have had a set framework or a way of playing. Nabaid touched on it there, that I think Chelsea under Maresca will have that. Maresca showed at Leicester that he has his methods, he has his ways, and he'll pick his team and base his team around his own methods. Maybe Sancho finally having a little bit of structure back in the Premier League would help him.
Yeah, I think also added to that point, Enzo Maresca loves technicians. And although Sancho is a winger, he's a wonderful technician. The ball's stuck to his feet all the time. So he's got the athletic forward. So it might balance out that he now has a forward that is more ball dominant, a bit more of the Jack Grealish mould than like a Pedro Neto mode. But yeah, it's really difficult to tell because generally there's going to be competition, how much game time will he get, and so on and so forth.
I think the evaluation of both of these deals, as you mentioned, Dave, these would be two separate deals between the clubs for both players. And I think when you look at Sterling's contract, he has 3 years left at Chelsea. Sancho has 2, but Sancho's still just 24 years old. You know, you still look at the potential left in his career, the heights he could still potentially reach. So it'll be really interesting to see what the valuation on the players will be in terms of the value, because Enzo Maresca has already made it clear that Raheem Sterling isn't going to be part of his 20 or so, 25 squad that he's working with. Whereas Erik ten Hag has taken the alternative stance of saying Sancho's very much part of our plans. You know, we've put the past behind us. He's just not making the matchday squad, but I'll have players throughout the season who will miss out. So it'll be really interesting to see how these two clubs, if a deal is to progress, how they kind of work out where the evaluation of these players are going to kind of rest at.
I think maybe if, let's say, Sancho went to Chelsea off the back of just being at Manchester United, you probably ask a little bit more questions around the move. But because he had that loan spell last season at Dortmund, because he played so well in that Champions League run, people have kind of remembered that there's a brilliant footballer there, and he is more than a winger, like Nabaid said. So I actually do think if Chelsea are going to have a lot of games as well, they're going to have the Conference League. You're going to see a lot of different players playing for Chelsea. This could actually be the kind of thing that he does need. I think in an ideal world, he probably does go back to Dortmund, but we know he doesn't really fit into how Dortmund do their transfer business. That was a one-off opportunistic loan that Dortmund took up on him last season. But he definitely needs a fresh start. I think being in London, where he's from, will probably help him, maybe help him feel a bit more settled, because he kind of felt settled over the last few years with the way his career's been.